If a man destroys your family with a smile on his face, how far would you go to take everything back? This isn't a story about rage. This is a story about silence, about planning, about what happens when the man who has lost everything stops grieving and starts building the perfect revenge. He cheated with my wife. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I burned his life down, piece by piece. What you're about to hear is not a murder confession. It's something far more terrifying. A true story, or at least one that could have been true. And once you hear it, you'll never look at your marriage, your friends, or your enemies the same way again. They say the moment your world begins to crack isn't a loud one. It's quiet, like the click of a doorknob turning the wrong way, or the smell of perfume that shouldn't be there. Something was off, and it wasn't the rain. Just helping my mom? Babe, she said. Her hips been bothering her. For me, it was a Wednesday. Rain clung to the windows like secrets refusing to fall. Every week, that wasn't caregiving. That was running, and I was the fool holding the stopwatch. And my children 4 and 6 came home, talking about Grandma's house again. 90 minutes away. Again, like a poisoned apple, I didn't hesitate, and there it was. Camille was sleeping with her high school ex. No names, no selfies, just the kind of laughter that stinks of guilt. She mocked the man's wife too, said she'd let herself go after the 3rd kid. The cruelty wasn't even hidden. It was casual. I remember their little shoes soaked with puddle water, my daughter laughing about a dog they played with. I smiled, but something inside me didn't. Locked away copies of Ron's photos. Still, something gnawed at me. My wife Camille brushed off my questions with the kind of practiced ease you learn from watching too many daytime soap operas. It wasn't the lie that bothered me. It was how badly she told it. And I wanted the whole stage to collapse on everyone. So I started logging her car mileage. 37 miles round trip to her parents' house. But she was clocking 400 miles a week. He tailed Camille. Shot photos like war photographer grainy, sad, explosive. He betrayed an empire that wasn't his to rule, and I was about to burn his kingdom down. She dropped the kids off at her parents', met him for lunch, then disappeared into motels that looked like graveyards for broken marriages. A month later, she left her AOL password scribbled on a sticky note near the keyboard. Referred by an old friend in the force, he had the voice of a man who'd seen too much and stopped caring. I liked that. Emails between her and an old college friend, reminiscing, conspiring. I printed everything. This wasn't about rage. Not anymore. Rage is fire, but revenge. Revenge is architecture. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I called a man named Ron, ex-cop turned private investigator. Ron didn't waste time. She always came back smiling. I started preparing the divorce quietly. Hired a lawyer. No affair survives without co-conspirators. It wasn't enough, because Camille didn't do this alone. Vice president of sales at his father-in-law's company. He didn't just cheat, so I asked Ron to find him. The man? The ghost. And when Ron came back, his eyes told me it was worse than I thought. His name was Bob, married, 3 kids. The fuse was lit. Bob. Even the name sounded harmless, friendly, almost. The kind of man you'd trust to water your plants or borrow your tools. Receipts from a motel that still used brass keys instead of plastic cards. Photos of Bob and Camille, her hand brushing his chest, his mouth against her neck. The half-closed blinds framing them like a crime scene. But names lie. And behind that bland syllable was a man whose life was built on other people. As patient as his wife, as his kids, and now mine. With familiarity, with habit. Like they'd done this 100 times before, and would do it 100 more. Ron handed me a thick folder, each page bleeding evidence. Lunches at a tired Italian restaurant, off Route 17. I stared at one photo too long. Not because it hurt enough, that pain had already calcified into something else, but because of the way she looked at him. Not with love. That's when I knew. This wasn't a fling. Her coworker Janine called me later to say Camille had gone pale, then red, then left without saying a word. Janine always liked me more. The kind of woman who left casseroles on widows' porches and baked too many cookies at Christmas. I imagined her eyes never leaving the road, not because she was calm, but because if she blinked, the dam would break. And I knew exactly how much of it a carefully delivered truth could bring. It's about theft. He stole her future, her dignity, the years she trusted him to protect their children and their name, and Claire. Claire struck me as a woman who never forgot a debt. She was, in every way, the opposite of Camille. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She read, quietly, page after page. Her father fired him the same day, Claire told him. No ceremony, no discussion. Just a pink slip and security escorting him out. And when she reached the last one, she closed it with 2 fingers, like sealing a coffin. This was a second life. I wasn't in it. His wife, on the other hand, was a mystery. I asked Ron what he knew. Her name was Claire. 3 kids. PTA president, Sunday school teacher. I asked Ron to meet her, show her what I now knew. Not out of kindness, but because I understood pain. The day Camille got served with the divorce papers, she was in the break room at her job. I made sure of it. At the same time, on the other side of town, Claire opened Ron's folder. I imagined her driving home that night, knuckles white on the wheel, the taste of betrayal caught between her molars like copper. And I just knew Bob had no idea what was coming, or Camille. You see, the thing about betrayal is, it's not just about cheating. Within 24 hours, she emptied their joint account. Within 48, she moved out with the kids and filed her own papers. And 3 days later, Bob was out of a job. Turns out, when you cheat on the daughter of the man who signs your paychecks, karma doesn't need to wait. That wasn't even the worst of it. Because Bob and Claire's house, that suburban palace with the trimmed hedges and granite countertops, it belonged to her parents. He came home from a failed job interview to find the locks changed. I heard he punched the front door until his knuckles bled. I heard her brother came out and told him to leave, and when Bob refused, took a swing that broke his nose. I heard the cops were called, but none of that mattered to me. Because this wasn't just about Bob anymore. This was about something older, something deeper. This was about taking back the pieces of myself that had been stolen one cruel act at a time, and I had just begun collecting. The thing about real revenge is that it doesn't end when the target falls. No, real revenge is slow. It's the silence after the explosion, the smoke in the lungs, the ash in your throat that never quite clears. Bob had lost everything. His job, his home, his family. From what Ron told me, he was crashing on a friend's couch, some bachelor with no wife, no kids, no curfews. He violated it twice. The third time, he spent a weekend in county lockup. Mugshot looked nothing like the man Camille had kissed in motel rooms. That I'd been cruel, controlling, that I was always suspicious, which, in fairness, I was. Suspicion is a survival instinct. When you've been raised in a house where love meant broken dishes and slammed doors, just a hollowed-out version, eyes puffy, lips split, pride gone. At school plays. At the emergency room when our son broke his arm, falling off a tree. A man who still thought microwave dinners and strip clubs were a lifestyle. Bob fit right in. But even that didn't last. One night he showed up drunk at Claire's house, shouting, slurring, begging. Her brother called the cops. A restraining order followed. Not even her mother, who quietly told me one day in a grocery store parking lot, I always knew she had it in her. In consequence. And Camille tried to play victim for a while, claimed I ambushed her, but no one bought it. Not the judge. Not her lawyer. Her job, her half of the savings, her apartment with the fake plants and scented candles, and most importantly, her version of the story. I let her dig that grave of lies, knowing she'd eventually try to climb out with clean hands. What it was, she never said. Still, I didn't celebrate. This wasn't a movie. No credits rolled. I still had to see her at birthday parties. We spoke only in logistics. But something about her had changed. The fire she once had, that dangerous, seductive blaze, was gone. She looked older, not in years, and that should have been enough. But it wasn't. Said he looked thinner, paler, like someone whose dreams had been rinsed out of him with motor, oil and cheap beer. About ensuring the truth stayed where it belonged, etched in the minds of those who mattered. Because while Bob had lost everything, Camille still had her dignity. You see, people like her, people who lie with ease and kiss with their eyes open, they know how to rewrite history. She told her friends I had spied on her, that I was unwell, that I'd turned the kids against her. So I did the one thing she didn't expect. I stayed silent. I didn't argue. I didn't correct. And when she posted a long, performative essay on social media about resilience and growing from pain, sent screenshots of the emails to her coworkers. Not all of them, just enough. One of them was her boss's wife. She was demoted within the week. It wasn't about the job or the money. It was about memory. Ron called me a few days later, said he saw Bob working at a tire shop off the freeway. I didn't visit. I didn't need to. Because the best revenge isn't about seeing someone suffer. It's about knowing they remember who made them bleed. And Bob, he would remember me. Every morning he woke up in that rented room smelling of mold and regret. Every time he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back, he would remember. So would she. They say time heals all wounds, but that's a lie told by people too afraid to remember. Time doesn't heal. It buries. It layers dirt over pain and calls it healing, hoping we'll forget what lies beneath. Still felt a twitch behind my ribs. Whenever I saw a silver SUV like the one Camille used to drive, that's what betrayal does. It doesn't kill you. It rewires you. But I hadn't forgotten. Not even close. It had been a year since the explosion, sensei. I pulled the pin and walked away from the wreckage. On the surface, my life was calmer. The kids were adjusting. Sitting in the corner booth of a diner across the parking lot, sipping coffee like it owed them something. My home, once filled with quiet tension, now held real silence, the peaceful kind. I even started sleeping again. But I still checked the locks. Still scanned crowds out of habit. One night, after dropping my daughter off at a friend's birthday party, I caught a glimpse of someone in my rearview mirror. A man, scruffy, gaunt. It was Bob. He didn't see me, but I saw him. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Then I drove away. He wasn't just broken. Turns you into someone who carries glass in their chest and calls it armor. You become careful, calculated, and maybe a little cold. He was haunted. What would justice have looked like if you hadn't gotten revenge? He wore it in the curve of his spine, the way his fingers twitched around the mug, like he was still waiting for the next thing to go wrong. But the words were wrapped in something else. Nostalgia, maybe, regret, or the desperate hope that enough time had passed to make her sins forgivable. He was the only one who really understood what had happened, not the facts, but the shape of it. The wound beneath it all. But because I needed to know if what I was becoming was something my kids could look in the eyes without flinching. He looked like a man who had finally realized his punishment wasn't prison or poverty, it was memory. I watched him for a long time. I should have felt satisfied, but I didn't. Camille's mask had cracked. Claire, from what little I'd heard, became the kind of woman who didn't just survive, but built something stronger from the rubble. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't fix you, it sharpens you. The way Camille's shirt hung half open as she laughed with her lover, it didn't hurt anymore, but it stayed, like smoke in old wood. But you don't become whole. I started seeing someone, a therapist. Not because I wanted to heal in the Instagram self-help kind of way. She asked me once, and I laughed, because I didn't have an answer. Justice. There's no justice in betrayal. There's only aftermath. Camille reached out around that time, some bland message about wanting to coordinate summer plans for the kids. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because silence, I had learned, is sometimes louder than screaming. Ron and I stayed in touch. He sent me a message once. Bob's selling used cars in Phoenix now. Looks about 20 years older. Just thought you'd want to know. I didn't respond. What was there left to say? Bob's fall had been complete. And me. I stood between past and present like a man staring at the blueprint of a house he used to live in. Sometimes at night, I still saw that motel room in my dreams. The red bedspread, the dim yellow lamp, and I knew deep down that, no matter how far Bob ran, no matter how many tires he changed or cars he sold or states he crossed, he'd always see me in the rear view. Not as a ghost, but as the man who had set fire to everything he thought he could get away with. There's a drawer in my bedroom, bottom right. Locked inside are things no one ever asks about: old photographs, court documents, 2 motel receipts, and a small stack of letters I never mailed. They're all addressed to Camille, each one written during those months, when the dust hadn't yet settled, when I still thought maybe, somehow, I'd wake up and this would all vanish, like breath on glass. The first letter started with a question. Asterisk, why him? But because I thought if I asked it out loud, it might echo back something human, something I could make sense of. Like whispering into a locked room just to hear your own voice, and know you're still alive. But there was never an answer that made sense. Not when you've been replaced in the story you helped build. Not because I wanted to know. Not really. I never sent that letter, or the others. Because the truth was, they weren't for her. They were for me. Some nights, I reread them. I don't cry. That part of me burned out long ago. But I study them like evidence, looking for the man I used to be. Man who still believed trust was permanent. That love meant loyalty. He's gone now, buried under legal fees and motel snapshots. But sometimes, in the handwriting, I catch a glimpse. And I wonder, if Camille ever read these, would she feel anything? Guilt? Shame? Or just annoyance that the mirror still shows her the scar? I'll never know, because she'll never read them. One letter, the one I did right, I gave to my son. About choices and pain, and the cost of letting bitterness rot your bones. I told him that sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about refusing to become what hurt you. He was 12 when he asked me, Dad, why don't you ever say bad things about Mom? We were in the car. Rain again. It always seems to rain when the important things happen. She smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone who'd won. I told him the truth, because it's not your burden to carry. That night I wrote him a letter. About what happened. Like someone who'd seen the edge of the world and chosen not to jump. I left the letter in his desk drawer. He's never mentioned it, but I know he read it. His eyes changed after that. Not darker, just clearer. Claire reached out once, a year after everything. Just a simple message. He's gone. I think he's finally gone. They become mirrors reminding each other that yes, it happened. It wasn't raining for once. The air smelled like cut grass and something else. Freedom, maybe, or just the absence of smoke. Yes, it was real. And no. You didn't imagine the fire. I asked, where? She replied, don't know, don't care. We met for coffee the next week. 2 ghosts, sipping tea, in a sunlit cafe, pretending we weren't both carved hollow by the same fire. She looked good, strong. She spoke about her kids, her new role at her father's company. It was the smile of someone who'd survived. And then she asked me something I didn't expect. Do you think people like them ever regret it? I paused. Only when they run out of people to lie to, I said. We didn't speak again. That's the thing about people bound by tragedy. They don't become friends. I drove home that evening with the windows down. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't check the rear view. Revenge, once complete, doesn't vanish, it lingers. It doesn't roar anymore, but it hums low beneath your ribs like a power line in fog. You stop waiting for justice to arrive at your door because you've already carved it out with your own hands. The kids, older now, moved between our homes, with the casual efficiency of survivors wise, beyond their years, in the language of emotional landmines. But even then, the war isn't over. I remember staring at it from across the field, wondering if it was a mistake or a message. I never asked. But silence has its dialects, and Camille's silence was defensive, sharp around the edges. Mine was final. It just becomes quiet. A few months after his final arrest, he just disappeared. Like smoke after a fire. His name vanished from local directories. His social media went dark. Even Ranhu could find anyone hit a wall. Camille and I still shared holidays in fragments. Thanksgiving lunch with me, dinner with her, alternating Christmas mornings. We didn't fight. We didn't speak. Really, she once showed up to our son's soccer game wearing a scarf ID, into something not quite human, just memory. A mistake in human form, but it made something clear. Even ghosts cling to souvenirs. A gas station bathroom where I caught a glimpse of tired eyes in the mirror, and thought for a half-second they might be his. Bob, meanwhile, had become a myth. Claire said he left the state, maybe the country. No one knew for sure. He was gone. And yet, sometimes, I felt him, in strange places. A coffee shop when the door creaked open behind me, a parking lot where a shadow moved too quickly. Paranoia? Maybe. But men like Bob don't vanish. They erode, slowly. About a man who swore he'd never let history repeat itself. Not after watching his own parents tear each other to pieces in a custody battle. That left more scars than conclusions. One evening, I got a letter, typed. No return address, no signature, just 5 words. You ruined my whole life. No name, no context. But I didn't need either. The sign had fallen down. The windows boarded up. Nature had begun reclaiming it, vines creeping up the faded stucco, graffiti half washed away by time and rain. I read it once, then folded it into the drawer with the others. He still thought this was about him. That was always Bob's mistake, believing the world rotated around his orbit of weakness and want. But it wasn't about him. It was about my kids. About what betrayal does to a home. Bob was just the match. She was the fuel. Camille and me. It smelled like rust and pine and something old enough to be forgiven. I was the one who stopped the fire from spreading further than it already had. Weeks later, I drove past the old motel where it all began. It looked like a carcass. I parked across the street and stared. Not out of nostalgia, where lies were consummated and innocence bled out. Out of reverence, because that place, that room, that bed, they were the altar where my old life was sacrificed. And like any battlefield, it deserves to be remembered, but not visited, not mourned, just acknowledged. I rolled down the window and let the wind blow through the car. Then I drove away, not towards something, but away from everything that no longer owned me. I used to wonder how the story would end, not the one people tell, youth aversion dressed up in court documents and whispered Giuseppe. The real one, the one that exists in the quiet space between your heartbeat and your memory, the one that lingers after the audience has left. Now I know. It ends when you stop needing it to end. Camille was there, of course. We stood across the lawn from each other as the speeches droned on. I watched her clap, wipe a tear, take photos. She looked like any proud mother, but there was a stiffness in her smile, like something inside her still feared being seen for what she really was. A few months ago, my son graduated from college. When the ceremony ended, she walked over to me. No pretense. No bitterness, just a single sentence. You were right to walk away, and then she left. Either way, it was the final word I didn't know I needed. A quiet knowing that vengeance has run its course, and now only the hollow echo of it remains. That was her apology. The truth is, forgiveness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the absence of hate. I never saw Bob again. Not really. Just a backyard fire pit, a quiet evening, and the scent of old paper turning into smoke. I watched the words disappear, swallowed by flames like they'd never mattered. But if you stay too long, it becomes your home. The kind of people I could never have raised if I'd let bitterness keep me company. But sometimes, when I pass strangers in alleyways, when I see a slumped figure at a bus stop or catch a reflection in a dirty window, I think that could be him. And for a long time, that idea gave me comfort. Almost imperceptibly, but not anymore. Because I've realized something essential. Vengeance is a temporary shelter. You live in it while the storm passes. And I was done living in ruins. The drawer where I kept the letters, I burned them. Every last one. Not in some grand symbolic ceremony. No reason to. No bitterness either. Just the people who went to war and walked away alive. She built a life that doesn't include shadows. I'm happy for her, in the way soldiers are happy when fellow survivors find peace. Maybe they never did. Claire and I haven't spoken in over a year. My children, my heart, they are the only legacy I care about now. And they are kind, strong, honest. Some nights, when the house is still, I sit on the porch and look at the stars. There's one that flickers more than the rest. Faint. I call it the end. Not because it marks where things stop, but because it marks where something new, quietly and stubbornly, began. Not with fire, not with fury, but with the final closing of a door, and the simple, stubborn act of walking away from it and never looking back. Grief is not reserved for death alone. Sometimes it follows betrayal quietly, persistently, like a shadow just behind your shoulder. You grieve the life you thought you had, the person you thought you knew, the version of yourself who once believed in permanence. It just lived in the house, tucked between daily routines and the hollow space on the couch where a family used to sit whole. By the third year, the grief no longer knocked. I didn't miss Camille. Before I knew the names of the motels, before I smelled his cologne in my daughter's backpack, before I became someone capable of planning ruin with surgical precision, I missed not knowing. There was a strange kind of peace in ignorance, before everything fractured. And yet, I wouldn't undo it. Because pain taught me things love never could. I knew now how people wear masks so well, they forget they're wearing them. I knew how quickly a home becomes a stage when lies echo off the walls. And I knew the kind of man I truly was, not just who I hoped to be. Camille, too, had changed. The years etched something in her less vanity, more distance. We spoke rarely, only for the kids. She once apologized, not in words, but in a look. When I asked what was wrong, she just said, "I don't want to be like her." One of those long silences that happens between two people who once shared everything and now barely share a language. She didn't cry. I didn't offer comfort. Some things can't be undone. They can only be outlived. Because you see the cracks, and you don't pretend they aren't there. That's the difference. Our daughter turned 16 that year. Sweet kid, bright. But I caught her crying one night, headphones in, face turned to the wall. She told me he knew the whole story and didn't flinch. I had tried to protect them, but pain has a way of seeping through the walls, no matter how thick you build them. Trust is a door that, once splintered, never quite closes again. She didn't have to explain who her was. I sat beside her and told her the truth. "You won't be." She nodded, said nothing. But she didn't cry again. The past, I realized, had bled into my children in ways I couldn't erase. Still, they were growing, learning, becoming more than the wreckage of two broken parents. His hair was mostly gone, his eyes hollow, and he walked like a man who didn't expect to be remembered. Claire and I exchanged emails sometimes. Not often, but enough. She had started seeing someone new. A quiet man, older, with no illusions of grandeur. I was glad for her. I never dated seriously. A few quiet dinners, nothing more. One day, out of nowhere, I saw a face that stopped my heart cold. The punishment had long since passed from courtroom to consciousness. It was him, Bob, thinner, older, walking out of a discount liquor store, 2 towns over, stuffing a crumpled receipt in his pocket. But I remembered. He didn't see me, or maybe he did, and just kept walking. I didn't follow. I didn't confront. Because the truth is, there was nothing left to take from him. Nothing. I hadn't already burned to the ground. He would carry me forever. Not as a man, but as a lesson, a consequence. A shape in the ashes that never fully cooled. That night, I slept with the window open. The breeze was cold, but clean. And I dreamed not of fire or fists or broken vows, but of silence, heavy, honest. In the end, this wasn't a story about betrayal. It was a story about what betrayal awakens inside us, what it demands. I didn't set out to destroy a man. I simply refused to let him walk away with my silence. Bob lost everything, but I didn't win. Because in revenge, there are no victors. Only survivors who carry the ash of what they once loved. Asterisk, you may hear this and think, I would have done the same. Maybe you would have. Or maybe you'd realize, as I did, that sometimes the coldest fire isn't rage. It's clarity. Asterisk, if this story haunted you. Good, it means you still feel something. Thank you for listening. And remember, every smile hides a story. Some of them still burn.